put aside for one moment that he is the world's leading author on the brain learning and thinking skills, the actual inventor of mind mapping, a professor, thank you very much, at Stenden University of Applied Sciences in Holland, the author of, get this, 120 books. Here's someone who's written 8 and thinks he's great. 120. He has been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize for services to education and humanity. He has a black belt in Aikido, and he's an Olympic rowing coach, founder of the Brain Trust charity, advisor to governments including Singapore, Mexico, China, Malaysia, UK and Indonesia. At 69 years of age, he has crammed more into his life than most could dream of. He's nearly died 5 times. He's designed his own suit, thank you very much. He shares a birthday with Rolling Stones drummer Charlie Watts. Would you please give a warm Sydney welcome to the extraordinary Tony Buzan.
Thank you, Michael, for that. I will endeavour to live up to it. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My session with you today is going to be on the title, in a sense, of the conference, which is the potential of the human brain, of your brain. And I'd just like to start by finding out generally who the audience is and what your interests, etc., are. So can I ask, first of all, how many of you here have used mind maps? Thank you. How many of you are still using mind maps? Very good. And in the workshop, I'll be going obviously into depth and detail on what a mind map actually is. Today, I'm going to talk about the history of how it began. Also, I would like to ask more questions. How many of you here are artists? Okay, so about 10. How many are poets? 15. How many of you are scientists? Okay, so about 60 of you. How many are not poets? Just confirming. And how many of you are not scientists? Good. And how many of you are not artists? Right. How many of you are not particularly interested in mathematics and physics? Okay, so good majority. How many of you not particularly interested in Mesopotamian history in the year 4500 BC? Okay, good. How many of you consider yourselves to be not particularly creative? Okay, so about 30%. How many of you consider or not consider yourselves, but how many of you have experienced, as life has progressed, a slight or even major decline in your memory skills? And it's interesting, everybody always remembers that with great clarity. And how many of you noticed a similar decline in your creativity, and here I'm referring specifically to your ability to fantasize, to envision clearly, to have the freshness of imagery that you did when you were a 5-year-old little girl or little boy? How many of you found that decline? Okay, so we're off to a very depressing start. Virtually no artists, virtually no scientists, no poets, failing memories, and diminishing creativity. I ask you just first of all to imprint the form of this mind map, the architecture of this mind map. This is a mind map. It's different from a concept map, different from idea mapping. That is a mind map. So if you just imprint the structure, the focus, etc., the story that I'm going to be telling you will make more sense, and so will what a mind map really is. I'd like to start with creativity studies. These are generic, and there are many different studies that have been done around the world, but the results are generally the same. The studies take groups of people by age, and then give them creativity tests, like the Torrance tests of creative thinking, in which they are asked to solve a problem, and the psychometrists, the observers, study the flexibility, the speed, the energy, the number of perspectives, the originality, etc., of the response. The first group is kindergarten children. How many of you have kindergarten kids? Okay, what percentage do you think they scored overall? Yeah, I hear high, high. How many of you think high? How many of you think very high? Very high it was. The next group, primary school children. How many of you have primary school kids? Okay, percentage? Ish. I hear 75, 80, 75 it was. Next group, senior school. How many of you have senior school kids? Quite a few. Percentage? I hear 50. It's like an auction, isn't it? And 50 it is. Now, what is terrible about these results is not only the results themselves, but the fact that you know the answers before I even put them up. So the studies are a complete waste of time. We know the answers. It's global. How many of you have graduated from a college or university? Virtually everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, congratulations. I am obviously in that sad group as well. And with adults, it continues. And this is public, general, global knowledge. We know that the brain declines with age. To make it even worse, it is normal. It's normal, as your show of hands demonstrated, and as such shows of hands always demonstrate. There is a decline with age. What happens to your brain cells as you get older? What happens to your brain cells as you get older? Yeah. Every audience knows that. They die. And what surprises and amuses me is the great enthusiasm with which people say that. What happens to your brain cells as you get older? They die. So it's a generally depressing scenario. It's why governments are getting very concerned, why organizations are getting concerned, because the average age of the average human is doing what? Going up. And therefore, ergo, the average creativity per capita is doing what? Going down. So the world is in a serious situation. The picture is, as in 50 years, that the general population will be kind of doddering, forgetful, uncreative, old people. So that's the bad news. The good news, and it is really good news, is that especially in terms of cognitive function, normal is not, and I emphasize, not natural. The way in which we are taught to remember is not natural. The way in which we are taught about our creativity is not natural. It is normal. Let me just start with a check on that. How many of you, when you were in your academic career, took notes? Okay, so that's basically 100%. How many of you like colors, like or love colors? Okay, so 100%. It's a natural thing for the brain to do. What prime color did you use to take notes in your academic career? What was the main color? Black and blue. So black and blue. One color, which is exactly what I was taught to do in my little school in England. It was so absolute that we had to use a quink blue-black. And if we dared to be so wild as to use blue or black, we were given 6 of the best and 100 lines. I will only use quick blue black ink in my notes. I will only use blue black ink in my notes. So we're going to metacognate today. We're going to think about the way we think, and especially the way we think about our own thinking. And the first thing to think about is why, in an audience of 1,000 people, all highly educated, all passionate about the brain, learning, and happiness and human fulfillment, why would all of those individuals, intelligent individuals, who love color, choose to use a blue or a black for the purpose of mentation, of memory, of learning, of understanding, of problem solving, of creativity? Why? So I now take you back to the story that I wanted to tell. When I was at university, my marks were beginning to go down, and therefore I took more and more notes. And even though I was taking lots of notes, and I was a good note taker, I could get 15 words on a line and get 10 out of 10 for notes. Even though I was taking good notes, my marks continued to go down. So I went to the librarian and I said, look, I need a book on how to use my brain. And she said, medical section's over there. I said, I don't want to take my brain out. I actually want to learn how to use it. She said, oh, there are no books on that. And I thought, what? You know, if I go to a shop and I buy a small radio, what do I get with it? Operations manual. If I buy a bike, if I buy a washing machine, a computer, operations manual. And there was no operations manual for the brain. So I began to think about what my brain actually did and how I reacted, how I both thought and felt. And what my brain actually did in terms of the panic when exams were beginning was to go through my notes and underline or highlight the key ideas. How many of you did that? Right. And I used to do it in red. I'd graduated to 2 colors in my notes. I used to take those key ideas and put them on little memory cards. How many of you did that? It's a natural response, isn't it? Looking for the essence. I calculated that the percentage of time that I had spent taking my notes, 100%, was 90% in comparison to 10% of the volume of my notes and my keynotes. So I'd been wasting 90% of my time, and then wasting 90% of time again, wasting that extra 90% by having to read what I'd written. So I was wasting 90 plus 90% of my time and confusing myself with normal notes because I couldn't get to the essence, couldn't get to the key. And then I realized that a picture is worth what? 1,000 words. And thus the mind map began to evolve because I put pictures in. I then realized that color was not childish, as I've been told. It was childlike, and it was a major thinking tool. So over the years, the mind map developed. I studied the notes of the great thinkers, and to my surprise and delight, people like Da Vinci, like Edison, like Madame Curie, Newton, Einstein, etc., all had images and lines and messy notes, which was extremely encouraging. And eventually I began to study the art and science of memory, and that is one of the things I want to focus with you on today. Natural, in terms of the brain, is the red arrow. At any given stage in life, both memory and creativity should be rising if the brain has been taught naturally, taught in a brain-friendly, brain-congruent manner. And I want us to consider our consideration in the context of time. Where are we today? If we look at the ages and revolutions of mankind, you have your indigenous societies. The first global societies were under the general heading of the agricultural. And in that time, we thought agriculturally. After that, the next global revolution was the industrial, during which time we thought industrially. And in both those ages, children were taught to be what? Workers, laborers. It's where the labor movement actually developed. So the question is, what age are we in now? Have a quick chat with your neighbors in groups of 3 or 4 and decide what they think. What age are we in now? Okay, group, let's check. When I say what age are we in now, I would like you individually to call out the age you think we're in. So we're going to have an oral vote. What age are we in now? Okay. The winners of that were information technology, computer type age, and that is the next age, in which we will think informationally, technologically, digitally, etc. And if we're in that age, that's a good thing to do, to think in the context of the age you are in. But if you are not in that age, then the thinking will be inappropriate. And we are not anymore in the information age, nor the technological age. All ages stay with us and are superseded by another age. Information gave us many wonderful things. It also gave us such delights as the biggest form of stress the world has ever had. What is the biggest form of global stress? It starts with information. Information overload. How many of you suffer from information overload? Right. So to deal with that, the brain designed the next age, which was the knowledge age, trying to gather the information, the data, and make sense of it in clustering. Such ideas and individuals as the knowledge management and the knowledge manager, the director of knowledge management, arose, and people were taught to think knowledgeably and to become knowledge workers. In Singapore, a few months ago, the directors of knowledge management decided it wasn't working. The reason why it wasn't working is that there's something far more important to manage than knowledge. Quick chat again in your group. What is it more important to manage than knowledge? Starting now. Okay, group. Again, tell me, what is it more important to manage than knowledge? Okay, a number of answers there. Environment was a lot. Time, money, I heard. Other people. May I suggest what is more important to manage and what all the speakers have been speaking about? What is more important to manage is the manager of knowledge. And what is the manager of knowledge? Yeah, the brain mind. So we are no longer in the knowledge age. We are just entering, thrillingly, the age of intelligence. And by intelligence, I mean, obviously, the multiple intelligences. And in the age of intelligence, we will learn to think how. That's not a difficult question. We will learn to think intelligently at last. And to think intelligently about all the others, about knowledge, about information, about technology, about the environment, about industry and about agriculture, etc. And especially we will learn to think intelligently about intelligence, which is what this conference is really all about, isn't it? Intelligence, the multiple intelligences, and how we generate those, how we nurture them, how we grow them. So in the age of intelligence, we can focus on intelligence with excitement and an expanding universe. And I want to very quickly show you what I consider to be the most important graph in the world. And if you can draw fast, draw this. This is the graph of the way your memory works while you are taking in information. So it's time going along the bottom. I'll just get out of your way for that. And the amount that you recall. And the way that our brains work is to remember by imagination and association. At the beginning of the graph, you have a primacy effect. We remember the first things. Think about it. So what? And there's a lot of so whats. We remember the last things. So what? How can we apply that to the management of our own minds? We remember anything which is big in imagination. We remember anything which is associated, and we sometimes will misremember. How many of you have had a romantic evening in which you say, "Do you remember, my darling, the wonderful time when blah, 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 blah?" And they say, "Yes, yes, yes." And then we were talking about so-and-so, yes. And I said so-and-so, yes. And then you said so-and-so. I didn't say so-and-so. No, yes, my darling, you did. I remember it perfectly well. Perfectly well. I said so-and-so. You said so-and-so. I said so-and-so. And then you did say so-and-so. I did not say so-and-so. Are you calling me a liar? Yes, I am. Anybody ever had an evening like that? That is imagination and association, just going off on an individual associative, imaginative journey. So the graph helps you to understand understanding. Now, those two key words, imagination and association, are words to hold as beacons for the rest of your life. And I'd like you to tell me, what language do you think it is that is my prime language? English? Tell me whatever you think your one is, what's your prime language? English, English. And I'm going to say no, no. Not English. Not Mandarin. Not Japanese, not German, not Spanish, not Northwest Australian Aboriginal, not Zulu. We're going to play a little game together. I want you to imagine you're a computer. I want you to imagine that you have an infinite database, which fundamentally you do. It's called your memory. I'm going to ask you to access a piece of data, and I want you to tell me what that data is. In other words, first of all, how long does it take? What does your brain actually give you? And when it's given you it, are there any associations or connections? A piece of data I want you to access is mango. Check it. How long did it take? What did you get? Any associations? Quick chat with your partners. Tell them what happened in your head. Okay, okay, group. All right, let's check. How long did it take? Yeah, instant. Think about that. From an infinite database you accessed, instant. If you can explain how you did that, you will get a Nobel Prize. And you'll get it just like that. because nobody can understand it. When you accessed it, did you get a nice little computer printout that said MANGO dash? What did you get? How many got a picture or an image? Look around, keep your hands up, look around. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the human race. Because our prime language is multisensory images and the associations and colors they generate. It is imagination and association. Where did you hear those before? In the most important graph in the world. That is the human language. That is the language we speak. Imagination and association. That is the language of science. It is the language of poetry. It is the language of art. How many of you here are scientists, poets, and artists? How many of you speak the language? You all are. And if you go through life thinking, I am not a scientist, you will eliminate experimentation from your life. If you think, I am not a poet, you will diminish your poetic soul. If you think, I am not an artist, you will put yourself in a prison for life. If you think, I am, and you know that you are, then your life will become artistic, poetic, scientific, and really happy and joyful. It will be natural, which is what we should be doing with our brains. And I'll be here on the panel to answer any questions. I would love to stay here all day with you, but my time is momentarily up, so I will see you in about 3 minutes in the panel. Thank you very much, artists, poets, scientists.